Part 5. Developist. Money won't create success. The freedom to make it will. Nelson Mandela. In the entrepreneurial world and business overall, mission and values are boring, overused words that are sometimes not entirely understood. They are seen as some pretentious corporate attributes that every company needs, although it's not entirely clear why. But in actuality, a company's mission, values, and goals can be a very powerful instrument, one of the best in entrepreneurship, leadership, and team building. It's striking how much time and attention business training and courses, books, and journals spend on applied technologies and tools, like active sales, time management, negotiation, overcoming objections, and so on. These are all very useful, of course, especially when you're talking about practical things like CRM implementation, project management, and methodologies like the agile business approach, where applicable. But it's surprising how little time and attention is spent on deeper motivation and team values. A parallel example would be mountain climbers preparing to scale a difficult peak, focusing only on their equipment, without thinking about why they want to make the ascent. If it is truly important to them, then they'll grit their teeth and overcome every obstacle to get to the top, regardless of whether they have the perfect equipment. If it's not truly essential to them, they might give up halfway through, even if they're carrying the very latest in high-tech gear. Let me give you an example of how it works. If you call your team a gang of lowlifes and constantly tell them what matters to you is deceiving and stealing, confirming this with your actions, then eventually, the only people who will be left on your team will be lowlifes, who enjoy deceiving and stealing. When you choose your team's mission and values, you are positioning it in the world, and it forms a kind of nucleus that begins to attract people who find that mission and those values a good fit. I've seen it many times. A business quickly takes off, grows into a major company, and then collapses because its leader behaved dishonestly in dealings with outsiders in the process of building the company. The company's top managers and employees aren't blind. They saw what their founder was doing, and that taught them by example, until they too began to behave dishonestly in dealings with their founder and company. The manifestation and especially the intentional introduction of destructive values inevitably destroys a company. It would be better in this case just to take on the default values of entrepreneurs who don't worry about these things, those of earning money and making a profit. But you have to remember that this is a weak mission characterized by weak values. It isn't very inspiring to work so that the owners and directors of your company, usually well off to begin with, get even richer. If your company has non-material goals that are actually important, it's much more motivating to employees. There's a well-known story about this. John F. Kennedy stopped by NASA and met a janitor mopping the hallway. They struck up a conversation, and JFK asked him what he did at NASA. The other man replied, "I'm helping put a man on the moon." You see, he wasn't working for a couple $100 a week. He was contributing to one of the greatest endeavors in human history. If he could have managed it, he would probably have worked there for free. There's another story about 3 bricklayers working together. When a traveler asked what they were doing, one of them replied angrily that he was earning his pay. The second, that he was building a wall. And the third, very inspired, that he was helping to erect a cathedral. The point of these stories is that when people are given a non-material goal they find important and meaningful, they will work with enthusiasm and energy. They'll work 15 hours a day instead of 8, because even when they're home, they'll be thinking about work, what to do next and how to do it better. Conversely, in companies that don't pay attention to non-material motivation, people may be in the office for the standard 8-hour day, but they'll only spend an hour actually working, or not at all. That's a 15-to-1 difference in productivity, 15 times more productive in the first instance. People who work in companies with a strong mission are happier, and it's a great feeling to make your team happy. In short, a mission is a truly magical element that can transform a company. A mission is what your company and team are, the self-identification of your company, the peak of the Dilt's pyramid. The mission should be inspiring and reflect what differentiates the company from others. How you phrase it matters. Instead of, "We provide the best surgical services in our field," say, "We save lives and improve health using and improving advanced cardiac surgery technologies." Missions are intended to serve for many years. Goals are better for shorter-term plans, and they should be both exciting and measurable, like Nike's initial one, "Crush Adidas." Values are something like a set of instincts that every employee needs to adopt. If, for example, a leader expresses and constantly cultivates the value of accuracy, he or she will see over time that employees stop missing deadlines and are providing accurate, undistorted information. If someone doesn't know some figures they've been asked about, they won't name some at random just to pacify their managers. Rather, they'll reply that they don't know, but will find out and report back. In this instance, they will understand that accuracy, in that company culture, is more important than just looking knowledgeable. Meanwhile, if the value the employees get is always look knowledgeable instead of accuracy, then employees will start tossing out information at random to adhere to that value. So improperly established values can cause damage. In addition, those values have to be real, not artificial. I saw a good example in one of Jim Collins's books. The leadership of a certain company announced, "We're all one big family." At the same time, the executives had offices in a separate wing with expensive interiors, mahogany furniture, and a separate dining area full of gourmet options. What kind of family is it if some members live and eat separately, and better than the rest? With that, for employees, the value goes in the trash. And together with it, please note, go all the rest of the values expressed by that leadership. Each and every one of them will be seen as a fake pseudo-motivational lie. Employees are very good at sensing a false note. When the staff at Sinet grew larger than 150, that's the number when you stop being able to recognize everyone's faces, we changed the value, "We support one another like family," to "We are more than a team," meaning that we should support each other, be more than just a work team. Because it isn't really much of a family if some people don't even know one another. I was talking to a random driver in Kazakhstan once and got off the subject of taxis. He told me about two executives he knew. One, an older man, managed a large pool of drivers, and his management style was based on constant swearing, shouting, and punishments. All his employees hated him. They came to work reluctantly and left at the earliest opportunity. The other, a 25-year-old man, was the top manager of a supermarket. He knew every detail of its production processes, helped out if difficulties arose, and praised his employees whenever he got the chance. When a water pipe burst, he spent the night there with other workers in a hole they dug, repairing the pipes. The people working there had enormous respect and love for him. He may not have officially declared a value of "We are all one big family," but the team realized that intuitively and all began to treat their colleagues accordingly. Values manifested in actions work. Values that are declared but not implemented don't work at all. The best approach is to clearly identify your values and strictly adhere to them. Values should be concise. A 10-page small print description of a company's values is hard to read and almost impossible to remember. Sinet's current list of values consists of 9 points, each elucidating 2 to 3 values. You can find them on our site. They include: we bring benefit to others, we value accuracy, we inspire development, we care for others, high-level professionalism, and we are more than a team. Values are less static than a mission. They evolve over time as the team develops. How do you cultivate your mission and values? Talk about them constantly. Write them in big print and hang them up in a prominent place. Write motivational letters and posts on the company blog about them. Find continual ways to motivate employees, like holding special competitions. Praise and encourage those who follow the values. Be merciless in parting ways with those who violate them. Gradually, you will create the kind of team you described in your vision for the company. It's like cutting a sword out of a piece of iron or carving a sculpture out of a block of stone. By acting systematically and cutting away the excess, you'll get what you need. I'll give an example of how we go about this. One of our initiatives related to development and personal growth is an annual athletic competition. Employees who participate name difficult but achievable goals. The company then helps them put those goals into action. After 2 months, we choose the winners and reward them with a trip abroad that is connected in some way to their objectives, on the company's dime. One year, the winners were 2 young women, a designer and a marketing specialist, who had aquaphobia. They had both nearly drowned as children and were too terrified ever since to go even knee-deep in the water. So the 2 women chose learning to swim as their 2-month challenge. The company paid for the services of a swim coach. He gave them lessons at a swimming pool and helped them gradually overcome their fear and learn how to stay afloat. We chose them as winners of the Sinet Challenge that year and paid for a 2-week trip to Sri Lanka to go kite surfing. They learned the basics. Just imagine, from aquaphobia to kite surfing in the waves of the Indian Ocean. Things like this really inspire a team and send a powerful signal that we are, in fact, focused on development, that we are developers. These instances inspire me on a personal level, infusing me with great energy and a desire to keep doing what I do, even all these years after the start of my entrepreneurial career. Another example relates to the value of caring. If employees adhere to this value, if they care, it leads to many positive things, both at work and outside of it. One of our young marketers was walking out of his apartment building one day and looked up to see a thin, almost imperceptible stream of smoke coming from one of the windows above. Maybe due to his own innate decency, or maybe partially because of the value of caring that the company had encouraged in him, he went back inside and found the apartment, saving the life of an elderly man in the apartment where the fire had started. Values can save lives. Leaders should support that kind of behavior. To celebrate him, we brought all our employees together, told them what he had done, gave him a gift, and published a story about his good deed on the main news page of ykt.ru. People see continual evidence of the fact that caring is a real value of the company. Such behavior stands out even more strikingly against the background of general negativity and cynicism in the world, and improves the company's image, thereby assisting in business development. These kinds of actions would be difficult or impossible to draw up in the form of specific job descriptions. Life and work present us with an endless variety of situations, and a director could write a multi-volume encyclopedia of instructions that would quickly grow outdated and would be simply impossible to read through and remember. It is much more effective to name about a dozen core values. My team gave me a spectacular birthday present one year. They did a good deed for every year I'd been alive. They found a home for a stray dog, brought groceries to an elderly person who lived alone, and gave presents to children in an orphanage, among other deeds. It was an amazing, touching moment. They understood that this would mean much more to me than, say, a gallon bottle of whiskey or a marble pen set. I realized, meanwhile, that they truly shared the values I was transmitting, and that I'd put together a great team. Up to this point, we'd focused on development instinctively, subconsciously. That was what helped us survive in difficult circumstances, when dozens of similar companies that launched around the same time as us later failed. Now we began to intentionally and systematically focus on contributing to the world through development, and to employ a visionary and values-based approach in everything related to our company, to an even greater extent than we already did. One step in this direction is the motivational letters I write occasionally to the team and post on our corporate blog. Here's a Summarized example from 2015. The path to happiness. The main purpose of our lives, the very motion in our life, is towards happiness. Dalai Lama 14. My dear teammates, I set forth in this letter a number of thoughts, plans, and dreams, which are the fruit of long reflection and the transformation of my personality over the course of my entire life, and particularly the last several years. I hope that it will help you, as it helps me, understand what we do and why, how to set goals, and how to live happier and more consciously. Everyone wants to be happy. It is a powerful urge, an innate element of our nature from the moment we are born. Happiness is a wonderful state that is natural for a person, one which we need to strive toward for ourselves, and help others to do so as well. How can we achieve it? How can we become happy? This question has always troubled humanity's best minds, and many different paths and solutions have been proposed. One traditional idea of happiness through the acquisition of material goods and pleasures, dating back to the Epicurean school of philosophy in ancient Greece, is now demonstrating its weakness. This is becoming increasingly obvious, perhaps because the era of famine, war, pandemics, and shortages of basic resources, which lasted for thousands of years, has gradually transitioned into an era of abundance since the mid-20th century. Researchers estimate that 30 to 50% of the food people produce today ends up in the landfill, thrown out by producers, retailers, and the consumers themselves. Our great-grandmothers and grandfathers had never seen electricity and ate roots they gathered in the forest, while today, the middle class can afford scallops from Vietnam for dinner and high-speed internet with IPTV at home, on both televisions and 5 gadgets. But none of it brings happiness. The car we want brings pleasure, but not happiness. Travel gives us new experiences, but not inner harmony, one of the fundamental components of happiness. And each time a person in the consumer world does not feel the expected happiness, he or she will decide on and select the next object of desire, believing that this is the thing that will bring happiness at last, be it designer clothes, a prestigious car, or a house. It is the endless pursuit of an elusive mirage of happiness. We need to realize that consumer culture was created and is maintained artificially. It is an engine of business, economics, and progress that helps civilizations develop. But, in and of itself, material wealth doesn't bring people true happiness. While still maintaining a comfortable living environment, access to high-quality education and medical care, and doing the activities that are important to you and give you positive experiences, you should try to focus on achieving happiness. The strongest, most powerful, and most convincing idea that I've come across on the subject of finding happiness is love. I like the following definition of love: when you are prepared to share the best things you have in life with the person you love, generously, selflessly, and unconditionally. The highest form of this selflessness is giving your very life. A person who loves another will give his or her own life for that person. A mother would get between a lion and her child without a second thought, would defend that child with her bare hands, with fierce and unwavering intensity. Some Eastern religions have given us the idea that people who love, who share and give instead of taking, are on the true path to happiness. And you can't love others unless you love yourself. This is a key point. You either have to become the kind of person you can love, or you need to learn to accept and love yourself the way you are. This is a complex topic for another letter. For myself, I chose the path of development and transformation, particularly because personal growth is an engaging and interesting process. You can share with others on a material, emotional, psychological, or intellectual level through positive manifestations of human nature. Conversely, it's possible to take something away through negative manifestations of the same. For example, by acting honestly and responsibly, you give the gift to others of reliability, confidence, and help. But if you demonstrate laziness or discouragement, You take the lost results and opportunities from someone else, and yourself as well. The stronger you are, the more people you can embrace with your giving and love, starting with yourself, your family, and on to the rest of humanity. I want to share the best of what I have with you, Sanishans. I love you. I share with you the very best work in Yakutsk, the results of which I am proud. I share my knowledge, experience, and sources of strength and motivation, including this letter. I share opportunities for travel and sports, one of the best things I have in life, and the opportunity to achieve material well-being. In the coming years, I will give key team members 25% of the share of capital in our existing companies, including the parent company, and I will keep doing the same for all future companies. As a result, the most ambitious, capable, and energetic among you will become USD millionaires. We are probably the only place in all Yakutia where all employees have a realistic chance of achieving that aim through their own hard work, talent, and extreme input of energy. Material wealth isn't a cause for happiness in and of itself, but it does help to create a comfortable living environment, provide resources for helping others, and gives one more very valuable thing: freedom. Freedom is among the greatest achievements in my life, earned through hard work, through long years during which I voluntarily gave up my freedom. I want to share that freedom and the knowledge of how to achieve it and use it. There's much more: high-quality medical care, education, personal growth, self-actualization in life, profit from business. Now, or a little later, all the best that I will create and earn in life on my own, I will share with you. And that will make me happy. Let this be an additional argument in favor of the positive approach. People who share, who give instead of take, receive support from others. It's a winning life strategy. Those who share with others through honesty, kindness, caring, hard work, trust, openness, and other positive qualities will succeed. Egotistical, selfish, irresponsible, hot-tempered, and lazy people will fail. I realized only recently that much of my success in building a very successful internet business in unfavorable conditions was due to my application of some of these positive strategies. Giving, you go through life like you're riding a bicycle on a smooth asphalt highway, while if you are always taking, you'll end up in the sand. Harmful actions, deceit, and betrayal always breed enemies, the desire for revenge, and harmful actions in return. Kindness, good deeds, hard work, and trust, in addition to increasing your own happiness, often bring additional benefit to you. Diligence and persistence will help you create a solid material foundation. Keeping the promises you make to partners and clients, behaving in a caring way, and providing high-quality services for them will engender gratitude and long-term loyalty. The desire to continue growing and learning new things leads to a high level of professionalism. We have never deceived anyone or done anyone harm. Share intentionally, consciously, without expecting anything in return, contributing to your own happiness. But be ready to accept gratitude and reciprocal kindness. I've always followed a positive approach without realizing its true role, just based on my upbringing and common sense, expecting benefits in return from myself and the company. In Osho's lexicon, I was behaving like an unconscious person who wanted to look good. Now, I understand that to achieve happiness, the foundation of my actions must be love, and these actions must be unselfish. Reciprocal benefit is nice, but should be a secondary and non-obligatory consequence. The main elements of the positive strategy necessary for professional activity in Senet are reflected in the company's values: honesty, accuracy, effectiveness, caring, development, friendliness and mutual assistance, and prevention of wrongdoing. There is a deep meaning in these values. Let us adhere to them going forward, climbing the upward spiral of good. Picture it: a close-knit team of first-class experienced professionals, following a positive life strategy, building a global business, selflessly and unconditionally sharing their talent and hard work with their friends and the world around them, sincerely happy. This vision is truly inspiring. It's a dream. Choose a positive strategy in all areas of your life, in work and personal life, with family and friends, and even with strangers. Use your common sense at the same time, and a correct understanding of the situation. Be honest with yourself and your own conscience. That internal integrity is the true meaning of the word. Trust those who have shown themselves to be trustworthy. Share the best of what you have, and love those who deserve it. I want to create and share the best of what I have with my family and friends, with you, with the inhabitants of Yakutia, and with the whole world. This motivates me and fills me with energy. I am prepared to move mountains to make that happen. Because it has that effect on me, maybe it will do the same for you. Take this idea as a source of motivation and vitality, as a path to happiness. Let us grow, help others grow, build a great company, love our homeland, create something valuable, share it with loved ones and the people we care about. Give the world something good, and be happy. With love, Arsen Tomsky, February 2nd, 2015. Interestingly, self-identification and values have an impact not only in regards to a single person or company, but on the level of whole nations and countries. Take Russia, for example. In my opinion, one of its main problems is the absence of an identity, mission, or as it is sometimes called, a national idea. What is Russia? What is its national idea? Its aggressive positioning is perceived negatively outside of the country, and internally as well, and people get tired of endless conflicts. What is Yakutia? We can try to start from the traditional phrases that come to mind: diamonds, cold, permafrost, and the characteristic of an economically specialized region. Yakutia can be described as a remote, vast, but underpopulated northern region with a very harsh climate, supplying the rest of the world with diamonds, gold, oil, and natural gas. This is a first draft, but it isn't very inspiring, and it's bound to grow weaker as the importance of hydrocarbons continues to fall. If we consider values, the situation is equally problematic. Consumer culture is the reigning value system now. Everywhere you look, people are, by default, focused on consuming, buying, getting rich any way you can. From morning till night, ads are telling us, buy this, buy that, and you'll be happy. It becomes absurd sometimes. Buy this toothpaste and you'll be happy. Other countries are paying attention to their national idea, their self-identification. Israel and Finland, for example, specialize in new technologies. Singapore, a port city and center of international business and trade in Asia, is safe and clean. China has claimed the position of number one country in the world in all the main categories. The U.S., in my view, has two main national ideas. The first is the American dream, that by working hard and applying your talent, you can succeed in life. According to the second, the U.S. is a global outpost of freedom and defender of human rights. And these ideas have worked for a long time, with many Americans proudly displaying the country's flag in front of their homes. I believe that our mission in Senet, to foster development through new technologies, would suit Yakutia. Imagine an entire region focused on creating a high-tech, efficient, and comfortable living environment for people, where being competitive on a global level, mastering advanced knowledge, being honest, and working hard were valued. Sounds great. I have a friend, Viktor Saltykov, who is an entrepreneur in the field of sports and fitness. Viktor has had an interesting life. He started out as a skinny little thing, then began working out and transformed himself into a super muscular bodybuilder. And after that, he switched to running and triathlons, turning into a lean, tanned athlete. I saw his most recent transformation myself. Viktor had become an ardent fan of running, and every time we saw each other, he would tell me what a fantastic sport it was. He told me when he ran his first half marathon, then his first marathon. As his rate of speed increased, so did his enjoyment of the process. As for me, I've hated running since I was a little kid. I found it boring, monotonous, and exhausting. Gradually, however, Victor's fascinating stories about running won me over, and I decided to try training for a marathon with him. I chose one of the 6 major marathons, Chicago. In May 2015, I was in New York and went for my first run in Central Park. I spent 36 agonizing minutes running 3 miles in the hot sun and didn't enjoy the experience one bit. But I'd made my decision, so I had to follow through. Gradually, using an app made by ASICS, I got into training, running an average of 20 to 25 miles each week. After about a month and a half, I began to enjoy my runs, and I chose a variety of different routes, often in interesting and beautiful places. Training for a marathon takes a minimum of 4 to 6 months, even if you're in good shape to start with and don't have any health issues. If a person isn't very athletic, it's better to spend at least a year preparing. I put myself on a strict diet and went from 175 to 176 pounds to 163 to 165 pounds. I sometimes lost even more weight and started looking a bit like a strange teenager. For the first time in many years, I got asked for my ID when buying beer. My alcohol intake, by the way, was very limited during this period. A couple of shots of hard alcohol will set you back a week or two in your progress. I could have a beer after a long run because it has the salt and other micronutrients the body loses with sweat during exercise. In addition to the fact that a cold beer after a 9 to 12 miles run, especially in the heat, is a delight and reward for the effort. Initially, unaccustomed to the exercise, my body tried to resist, especially with pain in the knees. But I worked on mastering the proper running form, taking a couple of sessions with physical trainers, and watching a series of educational videos on YouTube, and the problem disappeared. I also use kinesiology tape on my lateral knee ligaments to good effect. These special adhesive strips improve circulation and metabolism where you place them. So in short, if you go running 4 times a week, watch your diet, and don't overexert yourself, in 6 months you'll be in good shape. A couple of days before the marathon, I caught myself thinking that I was tired of walking. I wanted to run. In October 2015, I ran my first marathon in Chicago in 4 hours, 17 minutes. The average marathon goes like this. The first 10 miles are just delightful. There's a holiday atmosphere. The city is lovely. Tens of thousands of runners with you. Hundreds of thousands of people lining the street to cheer you on. People stick out their hands, wearing enormous novelty gloves, saying, "Give me 5, you're doing great." They offer you water, bananas, or candy. They hold signs like, "Pain is temporary, medals are forever," and "the beer is getting warm at the finish line," or "I know it seemed like such a great idea yesterday." Orchestras set up and play along the route. Cheerleading troops perform thrilling routines. And companies of firefighters dressed to the nines shout unintelligible slogans in unison. There's a general roar of shouts, songs, music, and the conversation of the spectators. Next to you are runners of every race, nationality, and age group. Many runners are in costume. Some just had a fun wig. But I also saw an Elvis and someone in an enormous Godzilla suit. How hot must they have been in there after 26 miles? All in all, it was an incredible, energizing spectacle. After 10 miles, the first wave of tiredness hits as the supply of energy fuel in the body, glycogen, runs out. Carbohydrate gels help, providing a quick infusion of energy for the run. After mile 20, you begin to suffer, gritting your teeth and pushing on. And after the 22nd mile, you have absolutely no idea why you volunteered for this torture. And you're thinking, never, ever again. But finally you hit that mile 26 and 385 yards. The finish line is up ahead. You take one more step forward, and volunteers are there to hang a well-earned finisher medal around your neck and hand you a towel and some snacks. A pleasant fatigue spreads through your body. You move through the crowd of other runners like yourself, tired and happy, and you think, I'd like to do that again. So, I signed up right away for my second major marathon in Tokyo, which was supposed to take place only 4 months after Chicago. I decided not to put it off and set myself the goal of running this one in under 4 hours. The runners I knew told me that 4 hours was the boundary past which it was a real marathon, and you become a marathoner. My goal was set, as was the day and place: Tokyo, February 28th, 2016. The Tokyo Marathon is one of the 6 most prestigious and popular global races, along with New York, Boston, Chicago, London, and Berlin. I'd never been to Japan, and running through its capital, one of the world's most famous cities, was interesting and exciting in and of itself. Aside from everything else, as far as I knew, I would be the first Saka to run the Tokyo Marathon, as I'd been the first in Chicago, which was an honor, of course, and gave me additional motivation. I began my preparatory training at the end of November, in a more concentrated and intense regime than before Chicago, running for longer distances at a faster pace. In 3 months, I ran over 350 miles in all kinds of different terrains and conditions. In comparison with my preparation for the first marathon, everything went smoothly, without any knee issues, and I was at an optimal weight already. I finished training and flew to Tokyo a few days ahead of the race. The Japanese capital impressed me with its perfect cleanliness, the forethought that went into every detail of life there, and the politeness of its inhabitants. This was the 10th year the marathon had been held in the Japanese capital. The number of runners increased every year, reaching 37,000 in 2016. Meanwhile, there were over 300,000 applicants, who had about a 1 in 10 chance of winning a slot in the lottery. Given the ever-increasing popularity of the race, the city will probably have to find a more spacious place for the starting line in the future. I think the success of Japanese runners in long-distance races, they often place in the top 10 of major marathons, may have contributed to interest in the race, among other factors, as well as a short and interesting book by the famous writer and avid runner Haruki Murakami, What I Talk About When I Talk About Running. At 9 a.m. the wheelchair athletes started, and the elite invited runners immediately after them, almost all from Eastern Africa, Ethiopia, Sudan, Kenya. They ended up coming in the top 7 places, both men and women, with times a little over 2 hours. A few minutes later, we crossed the starting line as well, and our marathon began. The run felt great, although the crowding made it a bit difficult to maneuver around the other runners. The race organizers had put me in the middle, Sector F, based on my time in Chicago, 4 hours, 17 minutes. In Tokyo, I ran much faster, aiming for a final time of 3 hours 40 minutes. That was the pace of Sector D, and I made my way up to their group in about an hour and a half, passing many runners on my way. I even began to see the odd person from Sector C. Everything was lovely. We had beautiful sunny weather at a very comfortable temperature for running, 50 degrees Fahrenheit, and around us we saw magnificent architecture and many well-dressed fans energetically supporting the participants. One thing that stood out in the Tokyo Marathon was the number of cool costumes. I saw Eastern princesses and King Kong running along past Stitch, Minions, and many more. Their marathon rules include the funny prohibition that a runner's headgear may not extend wider than his or her shoulders. So, a SpongeBob SquarePants costume would be just fine. It was on the 10th mile, right in the middle of the running fun for me, knowing as I did for my training not to expect the fatigue to hit until the 15th mile, when it began. The collateral ligament in my knee, which had given me trouble back when I first began training in May-June of the previous year but hadn't bothered me since, began to twinge, and in another couple of miles, it was really hurting. My pace dropped to a 10-minute mile. It emerged later that I had made an error in my choice of footwear. Having had no issues with my joints or ligaments during my preparation, I decided to run my second marathon in lightweight running shoes with a thin sole to reduce my load. The weight difference helps you run a little faster and lessens fatigue. During a marathon, those 100 to 150 grams add up to a transported cargo of 3 to 4 tons. I took a painkiller I had with me to dull the pain in my ligament. At the 13th mile, I stopped at the first aid station and wrapped my knee in an ordinary bandage, not kinesiology tape. I lost about 4 minutes waiting in line there and filling out a form. I would have lost more if I had waited in line politely, Japanese style, until the doctor was free. But I couldn't do it. I grabbed a bandage lying on a table, wrapped my own knee, and ran on. It was better at first, but then the pain began to grow. By the 15th mile, I was limping badly, almost hopping to compensate for the pain. My pace dropped even further, to an 11-minute mile. To give myself a desperately needed boost, I ate 2 carbohydrate gels with coffee and propolis, intended for the final miles of the race. At one point I was close to despair, and even slowed to a walk for a minute. But I felt then that I wasn't ready to give up, and that I was going to fight till the end. Moreover, I wasn't just going to finish. I was going to try to do it in under 4 hours. I still had a chance after my fast pace in the first 10 miles. I started running again. A little while later, I noticed that one of the spectators was holding an anesthetizing coolant spray. I ran over, quickly sprayed the painful area, and kept on going. It helped. I was running with almost no limp, my pace picking up to a mile in 9 minutes and 15 seconds. The pain began to return 5 minutes later, and I kept my eyes on the spectators, searching now for someone carrying that spray. I spotted someone. An elderly Japanese man had some and let me take it with me. Thank you, kind stranger. Arigato. I ran, spray in hand, freezing my knee every 3 to 4 minutes. Somewhere around the 19-mile mark, the calf muscles on my other leg started to act up. They kept seizing, probably also because of the thin-soled running shoes. But the coolant spray helped there as well. After 21 to 23 miles, my body seemed to have resigned itself to the fact that its owner was determined to keep running, and the intense pain subsided. I just felt the usual fatigue of the final phase of a marathon. The only hitch was that I had run out of the carbohydrate gels, so I stopped at an aid station for a sports drink and some bananas. I stopped running for no more than 15 seconds, but when I started back up, I felt a ferocious pain in my ligament and decided not to stop again until the end of the race. For the last 2 to 3 miles, I steeled myself and picked up the pace, getting up to 8 minutes 45 seconds to 9 minutes per mile, despite my intense fatigue and a pulse definitely over the anaerobic threshold. I still had a chance to make it under 4 hours, and that spurred me on. But it was a matter of seconds now. It would be extremely disappointing to miss the cutoff by just a minute or two. It would be like winning second place in a loser's competition. But when I did cross the finish line, I looked up to see the clock showing 3 hours, 58 minutes, 40 seconds. Only a minute to spare. If I'd spent any longer at the first aid station, spent 1 more minute walking, if I hadn't picked up the pace at the end, I wouldn't have made it. Not to mention what would have happened if I hadn't found someone with that coolant spray. I would have limped across the finish line at close to a walk, with a time of something like 5.5 hours. I found myself in an unusual emotional state after I finished. I felt enormously proud of myself, and a sense of some indestructible steel foundation within. This triggered an unexpected emotional catharsis, a rush of adrenaline, and I burst into tears for the first time in a long time. I didn't know it was possible to cry out of pride and the feeling of inner strength, or from feeling overwhelmed by happiness. Human psychology is full of paradoxes and the combination of opposites. It was a special moment and made that day one of my most vivid and meaningful memories. I had become a real marathoner. After the Tokyo Marathon, I fell truly in love with running. This simple and democratic sport lets you fully experience life with an alertness that many of us lose in the midst of our daily routine. It's a path of self-actualization and personal growth, to core values, and to your true self. Any run can turn into a fun, entertaining, and emotional adventure. This is particularly true if you start out well-rested and choose an interesting route. Along the seashore, a couple of times while running by the ocean, I've seen dolphins leaping out of the water, as if they were accompanying me, down a picturesque shady forest trail, through puddles in a warm summer shower, or under the vast starry night sky. Running wakes you up. It often feels like we're half asleep as we do the same things, day in and day out. And running is one thing that makes you feel alive, and like you are living in an amazing world. I was so inspired by running that I wanted to share this phenomenon with my fellow Yakutians. In the summer of 2016, 6 months after Tokyo, Viktor Soltykov and I held the first half marathon in Yakutsk. We completed a substantial amount of organizational work in a short time, including getting various approvals and resolving numerous major and minor issues. But it was well worth the effort. The result was a fabulous celebration of sports, willpower, and development. Since then, the half marathon has become an annual event in Yakutsk, and the number of registered participants, which grows every year, is currently over 1,000. We're also starting to see more and more signs of a real running celebration, joyful spectators along the route, volunteers, cheerleading teams, and runners in fun costumes. I think the day isn't far off when city residents, seeing people wearing medals on the day of the race, will applaud their efforts, as often happens in other cities. After the second year, Sinet stepped down as direct organizers of the race, as Viktor does an excellent job of handling everything, though we are still one of the main partners or sponsors of the event. The Yakutsk Half Marathon has become one of the key parts of the Sinet Challenge, our company's annual athletics competition. We send 2 or 3 winners of the challenge to international half marathons. The Yakutsk Half Marathon is one of the projects I'm particularly proud of, and I'm happy that I helped make it happen. It's so cool to watch the children's race. You see a whole horde of joyful children, puffing away, their tongues sticking out, running with all their might to the finish line, and each of them receives a well-deserved medal at the end. I was also happy to see that they introduced a separate start for wheelchair athletes. I think this event will get tens of thousands of people in Yakutia running, and they will discover all the benefits of this excellent sport. And that's great. A few years later, we've started a running program at InDrive and help organize inclusive running events and events for children all around the world. When I think about running and about my marathon experience, it seems to be a good metaphor for the development of a company. You get ready for the race, you study, you train. As the day draws closer, your excitement increases. Finally, the day arrives, and you start the race. I believe, as Einstein did, that the universe is generally a friendly place, that there always are spectators cheering for you along the sides of the road. You might think that you only have a couple miles till the end of the race, before realizing that you're only at the midpoint and need to endure more and put all your effort into it. You might tear the ligament in your knee halfway through, begin to experience difficulties and failures, but these might be, in retrospect, the prologue to an epic success story, a narrative of overcoming greater challenges and fights, to a great, victorious day for you, ascending to your life's summit. No matter how difficult the process, the distance is finite. If you are strong and prepared to endure and get through it, at the finish line, an enormous sense of pride and happiness is waiting. A new you is waiting. Metaphors in general are a very powerful tool, and they work. They're effective in self-motivation and in motivating a team, to describe goals and for the induction of emotions and ideas. I'll give an example. When I spoke with Artem Miryanov about his promotion from commercial director to general manager of YKT.ru, I use the metaphor of a vineyard to describe the difference between the two positions. Tending to a vineyard isn't just a matter of harvesting grapes, what a commercial director does. More importantly, you must cultivate it, fertilize the soil, look after the plants, get rid of weeds, and so on. This labor is especially important considering the fact that we are growing grapes in northern conditions, a difficult environment for the development of IT companies. When I hear someone saying that you should never give an inch, I give the example of steel. The best steel is both hard and flexible, and therefore more resistant to wear and pressure. When journalists are sometimes too eager to jump into a fight, I ask them to be a bit more careful and think of themselves as Mike Tyson at 17. They still need to grow, get stronger, learn, and train. Don't get into a fight with someone not in your age category. That's the only way to become a champion and bring the maximum benefit to people in the future. Metaphors provide a clear, easily comprehensible, and convincing visual image, which aids everyone as they go through the process of making and implementing decisions. Throughout 2015 and the start of 2016, we were launching InDriver across Russia, but our main focus gradually shifted to Kazakhstan, where our service blew up in every single city, without exception. The InDriver model was ideal for the cheerful and easygoing residents of that country, who value freedom of choice, the opportunity to save money, and the convenience of ordering a ride through an app instead of hailing cars on the side of the road. In just over a year, we became the #1 passenger transportation company in all 17 of Kazakhstan's major cities and throughout the country. Then, one fine day, I had a meeting in Moscow with an important personage, someone who, according to him, represented the interests of certain influential figures in Kazakhstan. He told me that because we were doing business in their country, I had to share with them, give them half our revenue, and that if we didn't cooperate, we wouldn't be able to operate in their country. We had a strict, long-standing principle at Sanet not to comply in these types of situations. We never took part in any corruption schemes, avoided taking government clients, and had long ago stopped running any political ads. That was not only reasonable but vital for the safe development of the company. The ethical aspect of corruption is key. When, for example, people take their cut of money allocated for medicine for hospitals, it means in essence that they are stealing the life and health of patients, including children. I don't think that example requires further comment. I understand that there might be serious problems ahead in Kazakhstan, but I also knew from experience that we had to stick to our principles and values. It always pays off in the long term. We turned them down flat. Around the same time, I had to reject 2 more enterprising mid-level bureaucrats from the Transportation Ministry in Astana, who also threatened us with trouble if we didn't agree to do business with them. I should note here that several months later, just weeks apart, Yandex.Taxi and Uber both launched in Kazakhstan. They were still 2 separate companies in Russia and the CIS at the time. So we can't say for certain who initiated the attack. All I can say is that on the morning of April 17, 2016, all of InDriver's IP addresses were blacklisted as prohibited addresses throughout the entire territory of Kazakhstan, under the false pretext of ensuring the safety of travel. The country has one main channel to the external internet, which has a filter like the Great Firewall of China. Sites that are particularly inappropriate in the eyes of the government sometimes end up blocked by the filter. Even Wikipedia suffered that fate at one point. As far as I know, InDriver was the first non-political resource to be blocked, which is certainly recognition of the company's staggering success. Suddenly, no passengers or drivers in Kazakhstan could open the app. In an instant, we lost all rides in a country we had taken pride in, and which we had considered a great success. But they didn't know who they were dealing with. The favorite claim of corrupt officials in any country where we had problems was that InDriver allegedly created unsafe travel conditions. In fact, the situation was the exact opposite. By running checks on drivers, tracking the entire route of each ride, and banning drivers who got low ratings from passengers, InDriver instead significantly improved the safety of travel. We transformed cities. People were no longer standing on the curb to get picked up by unknown drivers, whom it would be nearly impossible to find again. InDriver improves the lives of people in every city where it operates. This goes for smaller cities, where, prior to our arrival, there was only an outdated traditional taxi service with rude, unreliable dispatchers and drivers, as well as for major cities, where users value the freedom, transparency, and choice they have with InDriver. Drivers no longer want to serve an unseen, algorithm-wielding boss at a large ride-hailing service that forces them to conduct rides only in its terms, sometimes even mapping out the route before the trip starts and taking as much as 60% of the fare. Drivers with these services are obligated to always fulfill orders. Otherwise, they will be blocked by the system and lose a source of income. With us, the driver is free to decide whether to accept a ride at the price offered by the passenger, to bargain, or to decline the offer. This is an important point in many cities with safety issues, such as South Africa, Mexico, and Brazil, where the ability to see the whole itinerary of the upcoming trip, along with the rating and history of the potential passenger, could save the life of the driver. When I travel to cities where we operate and conduct interviews, people often thank me for the service that we've created. I've been thanked in large and mid-sized cities, and in small cities and villages. In the latter, prior to the arrival of InDriver, people often had to walk to get where they needed to go, because buses and taxis run inefficiently, or not at all. Uber and other similar services, as a rule, can't operate in those places. There are no maps. These services need maps and computerized address layouts of cities to calculate fares. With InDriver, people in those places can just type in the app, "the blue house next to the post office," and everyone knows exactly what they're talking about. After that, the price is established in direct bargaining between passenger and driver. In areas with a small population, InDriver is often the only real opportunity for car owners to earn some extra money. It's a social mechanism for distributing wealth from the middle class, which has the money to pay for taxis, to people who need additional sources of income to feed their families. We have also heard of many cases where InDriver helped to save someone's life. The first of these cases occurred back in the days of the independent drivers group. A girl in Yakutsk who had asthma was woken up in the middle of the night by an asthma attack, but found that her main inhaler was empty, and she left her backup at work. In these situations, you have only minutes to act. She called an ambulance, but they told her that all of their doctors were attending other patients, and that no one would be able to get there quickly. So she put in a request with the group online, briefly describing the situation, and asked for someone to bring her an inhaler with the medicine to save her life. Someone delivered it to her in 15 minutes. A true example of compassion and the miracle of supporting each other. Another time, a group of people got lost trying to cross the iced-over Lena River at night by car, got stuck in a snowdrift, and their engine died. This is a seriously dangerous situation in Yakutsk winter conditions. Lucky even to get a cell signal, they posted about their situation to InDriver. Several drivers responded immediately. One of them, driving an SUV, got their GPS coordinates through WhatsApp and managed to find and rescue them. We see cases like this all the time. This kind of example of people reacting with compassion and helping one another is impossible in the airless automated systems of big corporations. I am certain that a small, old-school dispatch office getting a call like that would just shrug and pass the caller on to emergency services. Price manipulation is impossible at InDriver. If you look online, you can find numerous articles in reputable publications like Forbes and Bloomberg, or in blogs, about how the big ride-hailing companies manipulate prices and other terms of their ride services. They've been caught setting higher rates for regular customers. They've got no choice, or for someone whose phone is running low on battery. At rush hour, when there's higher demand, services raise their rates, for example by 2 times the usual price, but no one knows why it's 2 times higher and not 1.3 times or 1.7 times. These are closed systems using confidential algorithms that can be easily manipulated. That's simply not an option with InDriver. It's an open, transparent market system where rates and terms of rides are set by the users themselves. Given all that, the claim that InDriver is unsafe or in some other way worsens the lives of the people who use it is simply a pretense for bureaucrats to lobby for their own or some third party's private interests. The service is clearly in demand and useful, and as a result, people support it. A year after we launch in a typical city, the data shows that 85 to 90% of active users came to us via invitation from their friends or family. What could be a better illustration of the benefits we provide? We put up a fierce fight from the very first day of the block in Kazakhstan. To borrow a phrase from The Godfather, our team went to the mattresses. The attack on the company electrified and mobilized the team. We began to constantly change the IP addresses of the app, which were then immediately blacklisted by our opponent, and the whole cycle would repeat. We sent several million text messages out to our users in Kazakhstan, recommending that they use a VPN to connect, paying a hefty fee to the SMS provider for it. We spoke to the media and bloggers. We hired a legal firm to take our case to court and to the Anti-Monopoly Committee. The way they blacklisted us, without a court ruling and on the basis of a dubious order issued by a single department, clearly violated proper legal procedures. We also began official negotiations with the Transportation Committee to find a legal resolution to the situation. As a result, within 2 to 3 months, the intensity of the blocking began to recede. Apparently, the bureaucrats were tired of dealing with it, and they also must have realized that they were getting a lot of negative PR. Moreover, no one had come to them, bowing and scraping with the offer they were expecting. Within about 6 months, we had restored the order volume we had prior to the block, and continued to grow. It took us 2 years to get the block officially lifted through the application of the anti-monopoly legislation. We had won another unequal battle against a stronger foe. That is the way of it when truth and justice are on your side, and you don't give up. Both you and your team gain experience and strength in circumstances like these. Which is why, although you shouldn't go looking for such problems, you shouldn't fear them either. People dislike and fear failures. Failures can demotivate you, sap your energy, and make you lose faith in yourself. I'm no exception, but I have learned over time to react more calmly and see the upside in it. I've had 3 major failures in my entrepreneurial career: the situation with the university in 3 Valleys, the failed attempt to expand our regional portal model, and the blocking of our sites in Kazakhstan. These were strong blows to me and the company. However, please note the following simple and important fact. These failures led to the greatest successes in my life and business career. As I've explained, Yakutsk University was granted the status of an innovative university after the competition, and was able to take the next step several years later to be named a federal university, along with 7 of the country's largest universities. Our work on the portal project necessitated a major upgrade in YKT.RU's technology, which went on to become Russia's foremost regional portal in terms of penetration of the regional internet audience. I took the attack in Kazakhstan very personally, and became very involved in InDriver, spending most of my time on it. Before that, I'd seen it as an important project, but one of many. We repulsed the attack in Kazakhstan and increased our indicators there by many times their previous level. Over the next several years, due in large part to the team's and my personal mobilization and focus, we took a huge step forward in the development of the project, improved the technology, moved into many more new cities, and began our international expansion. It's not worth it to go intentionally looking for failures, of course. Failures only teach you and your team what not to do, while success is valuable in that it teaches you how to achieve more of the same. The book, Rework Business Without Prejudice, cites an interesting fact. A study by Harvard Business School has determined that the chances of building a successful business are the same for an entrepreneur who has already made an unsuccessful attempt and one who is starting his or her first business, 23%. An entrepreneur with existing past success has better chances, 37%. From this, we can conclude we all take hits from life. You just need to be one of those who don't give up, someone who learns from and overcomes failure and grows stronger. Experience is an achievement that you can never lose, and is thus as valuable in its own way as the final result. Failure may turn into a wild success. Don't rush to conclusions. What seems like defeat now will turn out to be either a complete victory or the necessary stimulus driving you to one. Most importantly, don't be afraid to take action. A person who does nothing gets no results and no chances. When you do undertake something, work on it as hard as you can. In May 2016, we launched InDriver in 2 important locations, and both ended in failure. The first was in Tashkent, our first foray into Uzbekistan. Although Tashkent appeared on the surface to have much in common with the cities of its neighbor Kazakhstan, it turned out that the residents of the Uzbek capital had a different mindset and didn't enjoy bargaining. Also, the majority of them were not active smartphone users. After a short period of initial activity, as soon as we stopped the advertising campaign, the numbers began to drop. And if we're not growing organically through word of mouth in a city, we don't keep supporting it artificially. InDriver is the WhatsApp of the ride-hailing world, a company that has learned to develop primarily through organic traffic and mass launches. The second unsuccessful launch was our first outside of Russia and the former Soviet Union. The city was Yangon in Myanmar, formerly Burma, in Southeast Asia. We chose this city for 3 main reasons: the large number of taxis on the streets, the fact that none of our competitors were operating there, and that motorbikes were prohibited in the city center, meaning that the inhabitants were forced to use taxis more often. It was lovely to visit this exotic, vivid, bustling Asian metropolis, and to spend time talking to the local drivers and passengers. I was struck by the plaid skirts that many men wore, and the dark red color of their teeth from chewing betel nuts. We translated the app into Myanmarese, recruited the required number of drivers, and then launched our advertising campaign for passengers. Immediately, all manner of technical and logistical discrepancies and errors emerged. Some were absolute blunders and lapses on our part, from our team's lack of experience. For example, we had a few days when users of one of the major mobile operators weren't receiving the SMS they needed to confirm their registration in the app, and it took us far too long to notice. But that wasn't the main problem. The city seemed simply not to notice us. We were getting a few hundred rides a day, nothing for a city of 8 million residents. Our budget for the launch, over $100,000, was clearly insufficient. Moreover, people didn't like the app very much. We had a semi-automated system at the time, which meant that users who wanted to bargain had to call each other. Yangon residents didn't understand our ads. We adapted the same clip we had used to great effect in Russia and Kazakhstan, translating it into Myanmarese and bringing in local actors. In it, a young man in a supermarket approaches the cash register and begins unloading his cart, giving his own price for each item as he places it in front of the speechless cashier. The final pack shot of the app is accompanied by a voiceover on the topic of ride-hailing and InDriver. But in Myanmar, people watched that spot and decided that it was an ad for a grocery store, where you could pay for your products by bargaining like that, and got in contact with us, trying to find out where it was. It's key to verify that your audience understands an ad before you publicize it. Culture and mentality are different everywhere, with their own specificities and nuances in each place. The last factor on the list, but not the least important, was that the country simply wasn't ready for mobile applications. The internet in Myanmar was just opening up after the long rule of the military junta. Fees for internet access were just starting to decrease, and switched to unlimited or per megabyte plans after a long period of per second billing. Most locals were still in the habit of switching on the internet on their phones when they needed to use it, and turning it back off when they were done. After several weeks of fruitless effort, we were forced to admit the obvious. Neither we, our launch process, nor our technology were ready for operation outside of the familiar markets of the former Soviet states. These two failures of important launches, along with the blocking in Kazakhstan and some less than stellar launches in Russia, led to a serious morale crisis in mid-2016 in the team. We lost faith in ourselves and the product, and questioned whether it was something necessary and useful. We felt like giving up. I even told the staff at one meeting that we needed to reinvent InDriver all over again. To emerge from this crisis, we had to either rebuild the service from scratch or at least introduce some serious modifications and improvements. The following situation with Mail.ru also helped restore our faith. After our first contacts with venture capital funds in 2014, we kept in touch with the investment community without doing any targeted fundraising and avoiding any PR initiatives. One day I met Alexei Milevsky, the investment director of Mail.ru, one of Russia's two major technology holding companies, along with Yandex. Alexei was an intelligent, pleasant 30-something professional. We met a couple of times, and I told him about the company and our technology, sent him the basic numbers, and he became really interested. We signed an NDA and gave him complete access to our data. Milevsky flew to Yakutsk for a few days, talked with our key executives, saw how we worked, and went for some rides using InDriver. He liked everything he saw, and subsequently invited me to the Moscow headquarters of Mail.ru to a meeting with the head of the entire holding company, Dmitry Grishin. As a partner of the Russian oligarchs Yuri Milner and Alisher Usmanov, he has had a brilliant career in the IT industry, making the decisive contribution in the creation of Mail.ru, a powerful organization. Grishin and I spent an hour or so on the top floor of their skyscraper on Leningrad Avenue in Moscow, talking about a range of topics. I could see that Dmitry was assessing me as an entrepreneur and a person. From the little he said about the ride-hailing industry, I remember him telling me that Mail.ru had missed its moment to get into that market and wanted to take us on as an experienced team to, in his words, catch the last train. They invited me back a few days later to make an offer. I didn't know coming into the meeting whether investment or an acquisition was on the table. Oddly enough, I wasn't that worried. I was bolstered by the thought that we had created an excellent company and were deserving of a good offer. In addition to Milevsky, Boris Dobrodyov, head of the social network VK.com, was at the meeting. He went on to become managing director of the holding company. Alexei Milevsky named their terms. They were offering to buy 90% of InDriver for $68 million, with payment over 3 years and KPI indicators. Mail.ru is also prepared to make significant investments in InDriver, both in cash and through ads on its advertising platforms, the Mail.ru portal, the social networks VK.com and OK.ru, and its games and other resources. After everyone had finished speaking, the room was silent for a little while. I sat on the 26th floor, looking out at the sun and the sky through the floor-to-ceiling window. I could hear the sounds of cars on the highway far below us. Voices reached us from reception down the hall. I thought that a valuation of the company at $75 million was not a bad assessment of our work these past 3 years. And it was how some enterprising young Yakutsk residents started a public group on the social network VK.com. And now the owners of that network were offering us a deal. I thanked them for their offer and asked for a week to consider and talk it over with the team. Then I said my goodbyes and left. The proposal gave us serious cause to think. On the one hand, it was a big sum of money, however you looked at it. And then there was the opportunity to gain access to the almost unlimited resources of a company like Mail.ru. The remaining 10% could, as the company grew, bring in more than $68 million that they were paying for 90%. On the other hand, we had seen the powerful potential in the technology and prospects of our company. Even if we'd had a bad year and were in the middle of a run of failures and a crisis of faith in ourselves, the team was motivated and burning with a desire to scale the highest mountains, especially because we were working in ride-hailing, the hottest field for tech startups, where companies like Uber, Lyft, Ola, and Grab were doing multi-billion-dollar business before our very eyes. A good third of the top 20 unicorns, i.e. companies valued at $1 billion US, are currently ride-hailing companies. Moreover, unlike those companies named above, we didn't have access to serious investment resources or to large-scale international PR and other resources that are difficult to get for a startup from a small remote city in eastern Siberia. I spent several long hours on the rocky banks of the Lena River, in the picturesque countryside by the village of Yelonka, about 100 miles from Yakutsk, where I'd happened upon a rock-climbing festival on a beautiful summer day. The current of the enormous river flowed steadily downstream. The clouds drifted across the sky. And I sat there and thought, and couldn't reach a decision. Our other top executives were having the same trouble. Finally, after all our doubts and discussions, we decided that we wanted a price of at least $100 million US. This was a certain milestone for us. We could say with a clear conscience that we had achieved genuinely outstanding success, and our story could inspire many other people in their own IT development efforts. We told Mail.ru that we were prepared to discuss a deal for $100 million US. A little later, Malevsky responded that their offer remained unchanged. At that, I turned down their offer, free of my previous doubts. I learned much later that Mail.ru rejected the higher price tag for the following reason. Grecian had decided that I, as an experienced entrepreneur with my own established culture and beliefs, wouldn't fit in at their corporation and wouldn't stay long. After I left, InDriver would be at risk of failing, and Mail.ru wasn't prepared to risk more than it had initially proposed. This story provided an incredible boost to the team's confidence. In the language of gaming, one of Mail.ru's main businesses, we got a plus 100 in morale. Once you've made a decision, it's important never to regret it, especially if it was made on the basis of your principles and values. And all is for the best in the best of all possible worlds. The best confirmation of this postulate in our story is that only 3 years later, InDriver had grown tenfold. In the winter season of 2016 to 2017, we launched InDriver mostly within Russia and finished the launch process in cities in Kazakhstan, where we had simply run out of new cities. In those 2 years, the team did a major revamp of the product. We got rid of phone calls, added the counteroffer function and smart notifications of new ride requests, introduced driver ratings, and added numerous other updates and improvements. The technology became much more complex and multifactorial. Each city or town was described in the system with more than 100 different variables and parameters, giving the service maximum adaptability to the conditions of any city. We quickly perfected our method of selecting new cities for InDriver, the process of preparation and launch, subsequent development, and tech support. We switched our databases into high-load mode, adapting to the growing number of requests and data volumes. We paid particular attention to developing the organic potential of the service, making improvements in both the app itself and in marketing. After we introduced driver ratings by passengers and linked that information to the distribution of rides, drivers quickly became more polite and civilized. The average rating by passengers rose from 4.3 to 4.85 out of 5 in just a few months. A driver once opened the door for me from the outside as I was getting out. I wrote to my team in the chat, "Hooray, we've finally got perfect customer service." To which they replied, "Come on, Arsen, he just recognized your face." Oleg Sirkin, the former head of our main competitor in Yakutia, the taxi service Maxim, came to work for us and greatly improved our inner-city and cargo transport segment. Some time later, we discovered that our inner-city department, staffed by only 2 employees and with close to zero extra expenditures, was generating nearly the same quantity of rides in countries of the former Soviet Union as the recognized market leader, BlaBlaCar. That company, on the other hand, was pouring effort and investment into expanding into the regional market and couldn't turn a profit. For InDriver, intercity service became profitable almost immediately, with the figures steadily rising to quite respectable levels. We got more creative. In addition to ordinary advertising channels, we began for the first time to use new, non-standard methods of promotion to maintain our organic audience growth. We did things like put a cat on a lamppost, which a group of InDriver drivers then saved, creating a positive social media and mainstream media moment. And we plunged a piece of scrap metal into the hood of a car, posting a photo of it with a dramatic story about how the old taxi services were unhappy about the arrival of this daring new app to their city, with its significantly more advantageous conditions. And this was how they were trying to stop us. Those photos caused a sensation online. But the best gift of free PR we received were the complaints taxi services filed against us with various government bodies: the Prosecutor's Office, Anti-Monopoly Commission, and Traffic Police. The general public was outraged by these complaints and rushed to support us and our service, posting numerous messages about it in social networks and media resources. We publicized each such case in every way possible and came close to encouraging taxi services to file new complaints against us. We got through our crisis in 2016 with hard work. We focused, strengthened our team, and improved our product, launch process, marketing, and other processes, and saw that our company had taken off. With successful new launches and improved technology, we could now accelerate our expansion of the network of cities, and we began to start thinking about fundraising again. It would let us do more launches and move into cities with populations in the millions. Not far off beyond that loomed the prospect of a new attempt at expansion abroad. We prepared simple presentations, arranged our data into tables, and I started meeting with venture capital firms again. Foreign investors were not an option for now. InDriver was still a purely Russian company, with 100% revenue in Russia and the CIS. We tried to contact several international VCs, and either received no reply or were told to seek out Russian VC funds. So, we did. Russia has a small but quite active and advanced venture capital market. It began growing at the end of the 2000s and was on the rise at the start of 2010. But was then severely undercut by the political crisis of 2014, when the value of the ruble fell nearly by half. Many funds stopped investing or left the country, and the market for venture investing moved from developing to stagnation. One of the main downsides of the market in this country is that large corporations rarely buy startups. The number of such deals is orders of magnitude below similar indicators in the US, China, or Europe. So, a startup from Russia focused on the domestic market will have difficulty achieving an exit either by selling to a large company or doing an IPO and becoming a publicly listed company. This, in turn, is a serious demotivating factor for venture investors. Why should they invest in a company if they won't be able to get a return on investment by selling their shares in the future? Cases of Russian tech companies successfully expanding into the foreign market are rare, more the exception than the rule. The domestic market is a bit of a trap as I see it. On the one hand, the Russian market is large enough that startups can focus solely on the domestic market. But on the other hand, it's not large enough to have developed its own full-scale infrastructure, with IPO and M&A mechanisms. For example, startups in Israel or Estonia, say, simply have no other option but to immediately focus on global development. Meanwhile, companies in the US or China have sufficiently large domestic markets and infrastructure to go from concept to a multi-billion-dollar company within a couple years, before successfully going public or selling to a large corporation. Russia is somewhere in the middle, and this hinders local companies that are trying to determine a clear strategy. Another significant factor is that Russian tech companies are advanced in terms of programming and technology, but lacking in business development and entrepreneurial know-how. Founders and top managers often take action seemingly at random, without using modern methods and business development strategies, which aren't all that complex. At the bare minimum, they could read The Lean Startup by Eric Ries. InDriver needed an investment of about $5 to $10 million US. Venture investment funds handing out those kinds of checks were thin on the ground in Russia, maybe a few dozen in total, 100 times less than in North America and China. We began trying to reach them through our existing contacts. They were generally positive and interested in hearing what we had to say. We definitely stood out from other startups with our rapidly growing indicators, profitability, and unusual business model. The company's point of origin, Yakutia, was also unusual. The majority of Russian startups came out of Moscow, St. Petersburg, and other major cities. We did encounter a few funny and perplexing situations with investors. Once, the managing partner of a large, well-known Moscow venture capital firm, at the end of our meeting, proposed that I transfer the technology to them so that they could create their own company and start on the Moscow market with our technology. He kindly offered to discuss the size of the stake in this new company that they would be prepared to provide to me. Yes, business is business, and negotiating parties have the right to put any legal offer on the table. But there is a line past which an offer ceases to be ethical. In this case, in my view, the investor crossed that line. In a second meeting with another VC firm created by a large Russian corporation, my counterpart started playing good cop, bad cop with me. One of the managers was supportive and friendly, while the other was tossing out negative questions. I don't know what the goal of their manipulative game was, but in the end, I just threw the marker on the table and walked out. The general partner of the fund then went around telling the investment community that I threw a marker at his face and left the meeting. The funny thing is, he wasn't even at that second meeting. Yet another fund, after we held lengthy discussions and meetings with its limited partners, offered us $20 million US, twice our highest asking amount. They upped the amount to get more of our shares. We considered the offer seriously, but in the contracts and shareholder agreements they sent over, we found some unacceptable points. For example, the investor could at any time change the CEO of InDriver, or put the company up for sale in the event of a vaguely defined situation of unfavorable business development. The fund reserved the right to decide what was favorable or unfavorable business development. The fund rejected our request to remove those points from the documents, saying that these were standard conditions for them. Founders should say no to agreements containing landmines like that one. Sooner or later, they're going to blow up. Legal documents should be inspected with great care. One little destructive clause in fine print on page 30 can destroy your company. Experienced, reputable lawyers should be hired for this process, and the founder CEO should gain familiarity with the basic concepts of English law and be able to read and understand the main documents to be signed. The team is the main strength of a company. A weak team can ruin any thriving business, but a strong, motivated team can grow a business in the most difficult conditions. Many companies are still using material means as the basis for employee motivation. Money is important, of course, but it can't serve as the main or most powerful driver of growth, especially in an intellectual sphere like IT. Why not? We need to take a step back here and look at the bigger picture. There is no generally accepted universal definition of the meaning of life. In my opinion, life can be viewed as a large-scale deistic experiment with certain established rules of the game. Who is running it and for what purpose? We don't know, at least for now. But I believe it is clear that the main direction of life is development. Everything grows from the simple to the more complex. Single-celled organisms have evolved into the intelligent Homo sapiens. Tribes have evolved into complex, highly organized states. Fishing villages have grown into modern metropolises, and rotary phones have transformed into smartphones. In my view, from the point of view of a confirmed developist, good is what helps everyone continue to develop, and evil is what gets in the way. For example, helping orphans contributes to societal growth, while thievery and corruption hinder it. The famous historian Lev Gumilev said, "Ethnogenesis repeats ontogenesis." That is, the cycle of development of peoples and nations resembles the life cycle of an individual person. A nation has its own youth, maturity, and old age. To extend the analogy, human societies resemble multicelled organisms, and these societies, including companies, like multicelled organisms, are also focused on survival. This is a basic instinct. States and nations, like living organisms, have immune systems, i.e., morality, religion, and laws that protect them from harm and support development. These ancient systems strive to prevent murders, theft, violence, and other destructive actions, but they also gradually lose their power, particularly religion. People stop believing in dogmatic, immutable statements and things written in books composed thousands of years in the past. As a result, communities lose their guideposts and goals, which hinders their development. Civilization's response to this challenge was a new immune system, which emerged in the 20th century: the values of consumerism. Within this framework, people themselves constantly create new goals and meaning for their career, personal welfare, down to the level of planning individual purchases. Deviations from the norm and antisocial behavior carry the risk of losing status in the social consumer hierarchy. This simple universal system may be the most effective of any ever created, but it has some significant flaws. It's like a shoe of a particular size and shape, easy to make in mass quantities, but it doesn't fit everyone all the time. The consumer system is based on egotism, which in its extreme manifestations brings people once again closer to the animal world. This is well illustrated by footage of fistfights over discounted products on Black Friday, or the serious crimes committed for personal gain. In the case of companies, the consumerist system of motivation, based on material incentives, is also egocentric and of limited efficacy. It divides the team instead of bringing it together. What is to be done? Sinet has for many years demonstrated that its focus on constant development and contribution to the world is highly effective. With that focus, it's as if you're riding a wave, the driving force of the world at large, development, and you feel the universe beginning to support you. The second component, in addition to helping externally by contributing to others, makes the team members themselves feel happier. Researchers have found that at the moment a subject performs an action to help someone else, their brain releases oxytocin, which is associated with pro-social behavior and increased spirituality. In addition, it's a very interesting fact that the drive to help others is embedded deep in human nature. About 75,000 years ago, the Toba supervolcano erupted, causing a global winter and the mass extinction of species. A number of scientists believe that out of all Homo sapiens in existence, only a few thousand in Central Africa survived that period. How did they survive? What made them different from other animals and perhaps other tribes? Members of the tribe helping each other. These scientists believe that the tribe had a DNA mutation that created an instinct for helping one another. It's an interesting theory, but that instinct may have been generated not by genetic mutation, but by the culture of the tribe formed over thousands of years, in which it was habitual for members to help one another. Research by psychologists David Rand and Ziv Epstein on cases where people have risked their own lives to save others showed that those people rushed to help automatically, reflexively, without weighing the risks and possible consequences. This is a mechanism embedded deep in the subconscious. Humans are one of few species of animals who will give up their lives to protect the children of others, as well as their own. However this came about, the reflexive support of other people developed through evolution has helped humans achieve success and reach the top of the evolutionary pyramid. In motivating your team, you can and should use this instinct for helping one another, and the drive to give to others and make our contributions to the world. All our experience shows that this is an effective approach that truly works. You can intentionally look for businesses that work to make the world a better place, and avoid those with a negative impact. We, for example, have never sold alcohol or set up online gambling, and we never will. The result is a team inspired to contribute and develop that is cohesive, happier, and accepts these values. The company begins to grow, and it is stable organic growth that won't crumble over time, enabling you to scale the size of the team up to hundreds, then thousands of employees. With a team like that, you can create a remarkable business story, and the founder can be proud and happy with those results. Building such a company is also your contribution to the world. Commercial success follows development and contribution to the world, and we can also consider commercial achievements a measure of the benefit extended to as many people as possible. I like this quote from a letter written by 21-year-old Bruce Lee. "My goal isn't just to make money. I have many motives, including the following. I want the world to know the greatness of this Chinese art. I like to teach and help people. I like having a nice house for my family. I like to create something. And lastly, but among the most important reasons, Kung Fu is a part of me. I know that my idea is right, and so the results will be satisfactory. I'm truly not concerned about the reward, but I do think about how to achieve it. My contribution will be measured by my awards and success." For him, the reward or material success was a side effect of a person's contribution to the world. That's a deep and powerful idea. Development also has an intrinsic, astonishingly powerful inspirational effect. We can see this, for example, in the growth of a small group on a social network in Yakutsk, founded by ordinary city residents in response to price fixing, into a major global company. Or in our employees, suffering from aquaphobia, afraid to even get into the water, who, through effort and personal growth, could get to a place where they could go kite surfing in Sri Lanka and the Philippines. The Sanetians and I, and many other people, find stories like these truly inspiring. When willpower, intelligence, and talent make something valuable and important out of nothing. I invite everyone to take this approach. It works. Just imagine thousands of people focused on developing and improving the world, inspiring others through their actions. A few candles can light millions. Eventually, we found our first investor, the Lida Capital venture capital firm, which we contacted through networking. We talked a few times. We liked them, and they liked us. It's important for a startup to feel like the investor is on the same wavelength. In the case of Lida, this may have been related to the fact that the firm was founded by Lida Group, a technology company created by tech entrepreneur Alexander Chachova. He and I are about the same age and come from similar professional backgrounds. Like me, he spent many years working in Russian IT, building his own company, and we quickly hit it off. We valued the firm's good reputation, and Alexander himself has a very respectful and calm communication style. In English, I'd say the best adjective to describe it would be gentle. After we signed the term sheet, the fund did their due diligence, during which Alexander flew to our office in Yakutsk. I was actually on a business trip at the time. He saw a modern company working at the same level as leading tech companies, with a motivated and experienced team of professionals, and that sealed his decision to invest in us. We concluded an investment agreement for $5 million and soon had InDriver's very first investment money. Those funds enabled us to begin serious preparations in late summer 2017 for our most complex and important launch out of all the cities of the former Soviet Union, Moscow. Moving into Russia's capital was not only a resource-intensive effort due to the city's enormous size, it was also an extremely competitive market. There, the biggest companies in the industry were all fighting for each percentage of market share. Yandex.Taxi, Uber, Vezet, and many more. all pouring dozens and hundreds of millions of dollars into it. Moreover, Muscovites are more capricious and demanding consumers, with high expectations for customer service. We had to go out into that red ocean, to use Stephen Covey's terms, a much smaller company with limited resources, even considering the $5 million investment. In such situations with unequal opponents, you have to make a forceful move out of step with the rest, based not on the material resources you don't have, but on the intelligence and creativity of your team. I spent several weeks in Moscow using the main taxi services and aggregators, and talked to hundreds of people, both passengers and drivers. My conclusions were that everything was working fine in the short ride segment of the market. Rides were cheap, about 70 to 80 rubles, the same as fares for a bus, trolley, or subway ride, and more comfortable for passengers than those mass transit options. For drivers, the problem of excessively cheap short rides was solved by additional payment from the aggregators. I also learned that people would be willing to pay in cash or in direct payments through an app if they could save 15 to 25% of the cost of a ride. By using direct peer-to-peer payments, InDriver is able to avoid paying 4% to banks and payment systems, and it transfers those savings to passengers. We also learned from our unsuccessful launch in Yekaterinburg, where InDriver quickly gained a bad reputation among drivers, that the rates offered by passengers were too low, and they fought us because of that. After these internal discussions and subsequent design and development, we had a special version of InDriver for Moscow that focused on mid- and long-distance rides, and that didn't let passengers offer rates too low. In 3 months, we recruited about 3,000 Moscow drivers, professionals with licenses. It wasn't very difficult, because the majority hated the big aggregators for gradually making conditions worse, squeezing everything they could out of drivers, with low rates and an ever-increasing commission. Having gathered several thousand drivers, we went ahead with the launch. It was very exciting to see the InDriver icons moving around on the map of Moscow in our app, down streets familiar to everyone in Russia, and then to watch the order feed growing more lively, plus the positive feedback we were getting in the App Store from Moscow passengers. In just 6 months, we were getting tens of thousands of rides per day. That was a definite success, especially because we didn't give out any promotional offers, rewards for inviting friends, or bonuses to drivers. In short, we didn't pay for these users or artificially inflate their numbers. Their loyalty and appreciation were real and organic. 3 months later, we launched in St. Petersburg, also successfully. I was even more delighted to see our cars riding along the legendary streets and squares that I remembered from my childhood. Convinced that we were prepared to operate in complex, highly competitive markets, we began preparations to expand into foreign countries. Lita Capital had seen our team in action and supported these plans, signing another agreement with us for an additional $5 million. I also gave my first short interview to a global media resource, the Financial Times of England. The invention of a special model for Moscow is an interesting example of what I see as one of the main functions and tasks of the CEO of a tech company. An intelligent leader shouldn't simply formulate a development strategy for his or her company, but personally invent and implement an algorithm for solving strategically important tasks. A leader needs to be able to correctly understand a situation, see all the nuances of a task, and devise a strong sequence of actions. Then he or she must personally oversee the implementation of that process the first time, debug it, and pass it on to other top managers after teaching them how to implement it. This is how the best, most experienced pilots, mountain climbers, and gymnasts operate. They formulate complex new elements and perform them. Then others repeat what they have done. Real leadership is about providing an example and teaching, not about directing or controlling the actions of your staff. Another important function and duty of a leader is the ability to inspire and motivate the team, setting ambitious goals, and using material and non-material incentives. To inspire people and assist in their development is one of the best forms of caring for others. If a CEO has mastered the skills of strategy formulation, personally resolving key issues, training, and motivation, he or she becomes a skilled and powerful director, a true leader who the rest will follow. I like how Roland Huntford described the different leadership styles of Amundsen and Scott in his book, Race for the South Pole. Amundsen was well aware that people's personalities were an instrument on which the most beautiful melody could be played with light touches. Scott saw his companies as puppets on strings. The result was a depressive, passive expedition team, waiting like lifeless, voiceless robots for orders from above. Another sign of a true leader is a strong, outward-looking, transformative will, which is fundamentally different from one's personal ambitions.